right. We're being live streamed on Facebook. Best places to lead. This is going to be so fun. I see lots of fun people on this call. Craig Beskey. I'm so glad that Craig Beskey is here because Park, he needs your ABT framework. His and. We're going to teach him a lesson today. So I'm looking forward to it.
Hi, Greg. Glad you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Foxhall, inspirational visionary leader. Ashley Conley. Listen, if this is the first time you guys are here, we love to see your faces. And so we would encourage you to take yourself off, not having your camera on, or put your camera on. You could say it either way. So today it's going to be really, really fun. So I want to introduce Park Howell, who I came to know because Christopher Lochhead, who you've heard me talk about before, one of the 3 smartest marketing minds in the world, in my opinion, my humble opinion. And then I saw him on Pablo Gonzalez's show, the 4th smartest marketer in the world. And I just thought to myself, man, let me just tell you something. This would be amazing because one of the things that I see, Park, and we talked a little bit about this in our pre-show, is, so many people tell instead of tell stories. And when you can get people galvanized around something, it's really the best way to create change and motivate people and connect with people. And so I am excited for you to share with us this brilliant little framework that seems so simple that there's no way it could work. And yet here it is, it works. So thanks for coming with us today, Park.
Well, Jerry, thanks for having me. This is great. And I love seeing everyone pop in and their cameras on. That's so cool. I'll be darting down, looking at everyone, and then darting back up to my camera.
That's right. That's right. We keep it pretty informal here. So we'll chat for 30, 45 minutes, get people a breakdown, really give them this framework about how to put this into play so that they can get a real actionable framework that when they leave here, they can start using it when they go. So just a couple housekeeping things. If you have not joined the Best Places to Lead Facebook group, I would invite you to do that. Please go ahead and do that now if you haven't done it. It's kind of a fun place. We're still gaining some traction over there. And I would tell you, if you're here, go subscribe to our podcast. I know people don't see it every week, but we do it live, but it also gets repurposed as a podcast. So I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast. And as Alex Sanfilippo always reminds me, remind people to rate your show. So if you can give me a 5-star rating, that would be amazing. Helps us do this thing, right? I remind people all the time, I'm on a mission to positively impact 5 million people over the next 5 years. So I can only do it with your help. So I would appreciate it to help for sure. Park, let's get right into it because you're an author. You wrote The Narrative Gym with Randy Olson. You have your own book, and you do your own podcast, right? The Business of Story and Brand Witchery. You've spent 30 years in communication, right? Tell me how you got to this point of the ABT.
Well, let me correct one thing. I've actually 35 plus years. You can tell by the color of my hair. I've been doing this advertising, branding, marketing thing an awful long time. And I ran my own ad agency in Phoenix, Arizona for 20 of those years, starting in 1995. So we really launched an agency that was very traditional marketing, TV, radio, print, outdoor, direct mail, PR, that kind of thing, and no Yelp. So it was a lot easier way back then. And it was really fun for those first 10 years. The next 10 years, of course, saw the advent of technology. And what I like to say is our clients used to own the influence of mass media, but at the time, the masses were becoming the media. And now more so than ever today, that they own your story, they own my story, and they're happy to share it. And if we're not very careful on making sure that they are armed and equipped with the right story, the story that we want them to tell, well, you know what's going to happen. They're going to go up and go out there and make up their own story. So I went looking for an answer in the early 2000s because I knew that our advertising and branding was no longer as effective as it was. And I just really didn't totally understand the interwebs yet, still trying to figure them out actually. And I was lucky. Our middle child, our son Parker, was in film school at Chapman University in Orange, California, really phenomenal film school there. And I reminded him to get a minor in business while he was there, because unless he wanted to make films in our basement, he had to understand the business side of storytelling as well. And that's when I really got hooked into it, Jerry. I told Parker, I said, hey, when you're done with your books and any recorded lectures, send them to me since I'm paying for them, because I want to know, what do they teach you? How do they equip you as a competitive storyteller and probably the most competitive storytelling market in the world, LA and Hollywood? And so he did. I found the hero's journey. And I'm like, it was a revolution for me. It's like, wow, or a revelation for me. I thought, here is this pattern to story, this monomyth, as Joseph Campbell called it, that we see throughout Hollywood movies. And the most obvious are like The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars, of course, pretty much anything Spielberg makes. And I just thought, why don't we use a similar formula like this in business? And so I mapped the hero's journey and created the 10-step story cycle system, primarily for crafting brand stories. And that's my book in the background. You had mentioned Brand Bewitchery, that walks you through that. And I got to tell you, it was a science experiment at first, but it was really, really effective. In fact, the very first client I used it on, Adelante Healthcare, grew by 600%. And they will say it was precisely because they got their story dialed in, and everything they did was based off that story. Well, as I started teaching the story cycle system more and more, I realized it's really effective, but it's complicated. And it takes a while to understand how to do it. So in my journey, I started researching more. I found the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact. So I was able to go from the 10-step cycle down to the 5 steps, the 5 primal elements. And it was in 2013 that I read Dr. Randy Olson's second book called Connection, where in it, he introduced this concept of the and, but, therefore. And to me, from a branding standpoint, I looked at that and recognized it immediately for the power it had to take a complex message and make it simple. And so everything I teach now always begins with the and, but, therefore, because that is the foundation for all influential, persuasive business storytelling. And you're right, it's just 3 words, and, but, therefore, but it's much more complicated than that. I'll take a breath now at this moment, Jerry, and throw it back to you.
I love it. So one of the things that I always love, because, I help senior leaders. And one of the things that I look at is these consultants and coaches who have never actually been at the front lines of doing this. It's like, not exactly sure how you're helping people when you haven't actually done the thing that they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. And so I love that you, with Brand Bewitchery, took it from the front lines, distilled it into something because you made these connections and said, okay, here's what works. And then had the courage to continue to iterate it forward. I think most people get like wrapped around, hey, this is mine, I'm going to continue to teach it. And so I love that you did that, because like I've read Story Brand, and it's great. It's the hero's journey and it's the guide. But for me, like crafting that, I'm not a Hollywood screenwriter, I'm not a producer. And so it's like, okay, give me, I hate to have like the 7-second attention span in this world, but like, how do we make this simpler, easier, and more accessible? And Paul, who helps me write some of the things that we write, we were talking about it this morning because we were on our call, and we were talking about the narrative, Jim, and the ABT framework. And even though it's simple to understand, boy, you have to work at it to become a craftsman at it.
Yeah.
And so we were just thinking about that process. Can you walk us through what is exactly the ABT framework and how it works?
Absolutely. And so again, I learned it from Dr. Randy Olson, Harvard evolutionary biologist, USC film school grad, produced 3 documentaries on climate change and global warming, and has written, I think, 6 books now teaching scientists and academics how to use what he learned from Hollywood to communicate their big ideas. So he and I were on these parallel paths. I was just simply learning what Hollywood knew so I could help business leaders and companies communicate their big ideas. And then our worlds collided, and he's a great friend of mine now. And he and I have been working on the ABT together ever since. And in fact, during the pandemic, I was a part of his teaching group, and we taught over 300 scientists how to use this narrative framework. And so Randy keeps reminding me from the evolutionary standpoint, he said, Park, all science is taking the very complex and simplifying it down. So that's all I did in business. I just didn't know I was doing it, taking the complex hero's journey and boiling it down to the ABT when I saw that. So now I teach everything exactly backwards. The ABT is so marvelous. It works because it uses the three forces of story. And what I mean by those three forces are agreement, contradiction, and consequence. Now, why they work is our internal limbic subconscious brain is pattern seeking, cause and effect, decision making, buying brain, loves it when we deliver it content that is already set up with how it naturally likes to digest information. Set the scene for me, a shared vision, but plot twist, why don't we currently have it? What is it we're up against? And therefore, what do we need to do about it? It loves that. So we found that the ABT, and it doesn't matter if you have just a 15-second message you're trying to get across or a 2-hour movie. It still follows the same thing of agreement. Act one, let's set the stage, introduce you to the characters, determine what they want and why it's important to them so we can all agree that we're in the same story together. Act two, but here's the contradiction. Here's where the universe punches them in the nose and all the hell that they have to go through to come out of the other end of the consequence of that in Act three when we have resolution. It's the same is true with the hero's journey, follows the exact same thing. There's just a lot of these nuanced steps in between it. So we now teach the ABT because it builds narrative intuition in people. Christopher Lochhead said it best. I've got a great quote of his that he said, what he loves about the ABT is it creates this shared vision with the and, but introduces the problem, and no one is going to buy from you unless you are solving a problem for them. And then therefore, you have now set the stage for why you are best equipped to be able to help them get it. And again, you can do this, Jerry, in under 10 seconds. A quick example, I was doing a bunch of work with Home Depot and their internal sales team. And one of the guys there asked me, he goes, Park, what's the shortest ABT you know? Here it is. You communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story. So that is in and of itself is not a story, but it uses the three forces of story that ignites that subconscious limbic brain, where all of our real buying decisions are being made. Setup, problem, resolution.
I think it's so good because the but is that creates that tension. And I have found people over time, they and themselves to death on a story. And it's like, okay, and what's next? And there's never any tension that gets put in here to say like, okay, keep me interested. Whereas that but forces that that conflict. And to your point, and anyone who's heard me talk, I talk about this all the time. You have to solve a problem that is important enough and painful enough that people will continue to take out their wallet and pay you. And if you're not doing that, then you probably don't have a business for very long, or hopefully you're running a nonprofit, which is fine too. Walk me through, Mark, what are some of the mistakes that happen when leaders just can't get this piece of it right? The ability to tell stories that move people, that change the framework, that compel people into new ideas and taking new action.
Well, let me pose a question to you, Jerry. When was the last time anybody in this room here bought anything because they were bored? Or were bored into buying anything? So if you're a leader and you show up with your PowerPoint and it's filled with your stats, facts, bullets, and you're anding your audience to death, they are going to check out. They can't help themselves because their subconscious limbic brain checks out, says, there's nothing here for me. I need to go and look other ways. Let's just back into that just a little bit. So our subconscious brain, the limbic brain, has not changed appreciably in the 130,000 years we have been traipsing around the planet. Our ancestors who navigated and survived the savannah used essentially the same apparatus that we use today to navigate the internet and this onslaught of communication coming at us. Now, it was always a narrative brain. And whenever you are communicating in just and, that is called all exposition. It is non-narrative, and you lose that limbic brain because it's scanning, trying to determine, is there a fight or flight situation here? Is there an opportunity here? And if we don't get to that but, then we're not triggering that part of the brain. If we and it to death, it will literally shut off and go and start staring out the window. That's why leaders who are really good at narrative and understand the setup, problem, resolution dynamic are the ones that are the most powerful. Let me give you an example. Lincoln, Gettysburg Address. If you go and look it up, it is a perfect and but therefore. You have this great country, but now we are embroiled in the Civil War. Therefore, we are here to consecrate this land and make sure that we do right by all those that have died here. Set up, problem, resolution. Now, the interesting thing to me about the Gettysburg Address and the ABT in this instance, Lincoln was the second speaker. He was not even the keynote speaker at Gettysburg that day. Do you know who was?
I do not.
Nobody does. I think 5 people in 10 years have gotten it right. Gentleman by the name of Edward Everett.
I was going to say, we have a history buff. Bill Holmes is a history buff. And I saw him on the call. I was going to give him a chance to be a hero.
Well, Edward Everett goes on stage, self-proclaimed orator, former Secretary of State, speaks for 2 hours. And he's completely lost, non-narrative for 2 hours, completely lost in the history books. Lincoln steps up, takes the stage. Gettysburg Address is just 2 minutes long, 272 words or thereabouts. And when you read through it, it is a perfect and, but, therefore. He knew, because he was just a great storyteller, how to hook into that storytelling apparatus in his audience. He did not know about the ABT, but when you look throughout history, you will see the most compelling leadership addresses have an embedded ABT throughout, whether their screenwriters had this thing totally, or their speechwriters had it totally dialed in, or the leaders. But that's what you've got to have. And with the and, but, therefore, I say you get one and to set up that statement of agreement, that positive statement of agreement. You want this, and it's important to you because of that, but you don't have it because of this. Therefore, imagine how great it's going to be when you get it as I help you do this, this, and this. So I just, made that up in under 10 seconds. I'm able to set the stage and the theme for all of my communication to come. And here's the one of the tricks. If you can build as much contrast between your statement of agreement and your statement of contradiction, your audience will give you all day long for your therefore statement of consequence. And of course, it's the therefore statement of consequence where you deliver all of the reasoning of why you are the go-to person and you have your call to action built into it. But it's meaningless unless you have not set it up, unless you set it up with this narrative framework of the and, but, to get you to the therefore.
Interesting. I'm going to pause just for half a second because I can see some of the people that are on the call are leaders, salespeople, marketers, which I love. I want you to think about your business as Park and I continue on this journey and what your ABT statement is for the people that you serve, for the problem that you are solving for. Because I'd love maybe towards the end to pull someone on or 2 people on or anyone who wants to do it to get some feedback on what their ABT might look like and how they could level that piece of it up. So give everyone some thought there.
Yeah, so the ABT is fantastic to really dial in your own brand narrative of what does your brand stand for. Who are you helping? Why don't they currently have it? And how do you help them? So we use the ABT all the time and really defining a unique value proposition for a brand. First, starting with that ABT statement, which basically is your positioning statement in the marketplace. What makes you different and therefore better than your customers? And what is that one problem you are solving for? Even though you may solve a lot of different problems, we are always trying to find that one overall narrative problem that you are solving on their behalf. And then you could go on and talk about the different things that you do in order for them to be successful with that. So it's really powerful for you to sit down, and I'll give you the quick little instruction manual on it. Select your number one audience. I know you probably serve 2, 3, 5 different audiences. I want you to pick the number one audience that makes up 80% of your sales. Describe them. What do they want in relation to your offering? And why is that important to them? But why is their life miserable? Because they don't have it. What is it that's standing in their way from getting it? Therefore, how can life be so much better for them if they're working for you or with you in what you have to offer? So what that does is it gets you super focused on a singular narrative, your singular brand narrative on what you are there to solve and for whom. Now, 2 things you're going to realize as you're starting to write these. These are 2 major paradigm shifts. You hear about the first one a lot more lately, but I'm still amazed at how many people have to think through this. You and your brand are not the center of the story ever. Your audience is always the center of the story, just like in the hero's journey. You've got a singular protagonist. He or she has a lot of other people around to help them, but the story is always about one individual. So your brand story is about that individual you serve. What do they want? And why is that important to them? Number 2, your story is not about what you make, but what you make happen. People don't care about your product or service. They don't care about your widgets. They don't care about your features and benefits. Benefits, yes. What is it that you make happen in their life? When you are telling their story this way from their point of view, talking about what you are going to make happen for them, you're cutting into the limbic brain, that emotional center that gets them hooked with the context of your offering. Then yes, there is a point when you've got to come back in and now appeal to the logic-driven brain once that emotional center, that heart has been hooked. Because essentially what your prospect is saying is, okay, that sounds awesome. Prove it to me. Well, here's how I do it. Then you can lead into the data and the charts and the graphs and that sort of thing. But that comes way later. You want to hook them first by placing them at the center of the story and talking about what you make happen in their life, not about what you make.
That's amazing, right? I mean, it's such a good, simple framework that you keep on, weaving the needle through and just giving us more and more context and clues of how to do this. One thing that I think is interesting is how well people know their clients or the people they serve. And, it's very hard to do this incredibly well if you're not speaking to your clients or your customers, picking up the phone. I've seen some really interesting dynamics inside companies when I'm encouraging people to call and talk to their customers, where sales feels like they own the customer and they don't want anyone else talking to them. They don't want marketing talking to them. And as I just think about this, it's just another reminder for me and a reminder for everyone who's on the call that make sure you're speaking to the people you serve. Make sure you're speaking directly to the number one thing that you're doing to help them, because, to your point, you need the one thing. I think where I have seen this go wrong, and this is in my personal exercise of trying to become a craftsman of the ABT, I'm trying to solve too many things because I get excited. I'm like, oh, well, it's this and this and this and this and this, and that's the thing. And most people, we want to preserve optionality. So let me do this and this and this and this and this. So depending on who you are, you can pick your Chinese menu of A, B, or C, and therefore you miss the mark on speaking to anyone. So I think, to your point, just a small pause to stop and remind everyone, pick up the phone and call your people, because as you do this, the better you are at doing this, the more effective you're going to be in solving people's problems. Why? Because they told you why they chose you and the problem you were solving for them. You don't have to guess at it. It just takes a little bit of work to pick up the phone and do that. I think, Kurt Thomas is on the call. His objective for the quarter is to call every single one of their distributors. I think it's amazing. The insights that he's getting is incredible in being able to craft their marketing messages back to the community. So,
Jerry, that was really underscored to me in all places out of Hollywood. If you've heard of Robert McKee, then you'll know of him as this legendary screenwriting coach. And he's got this legendary screenwriting seminar, 3-day seminar called Story. And when I went to it, it was back in 2009 at the Sheraton LAX. I went with my son, who was there for his filmmaking world, but I was there for my marketing making world. And I was sitting in a room. We were there with, I don't know, about 300 screenwriter wannabes. And McKee gets up and he's just incredible in how he teaches. So he was teaching to screenwriters, not to marketers, but so many of the principles played through. For instance, he said, and this really landed with me big time, he was telling the screenwriters that you have to understand your protagonist in a godlike way. If you don't, your audience is going to see right through you as the fake you are. So I just shifted that over into business and said, I've got to understand my customer, my prospect in a godlike way. What motivates them? What drives them? What hurts them? What are they fearful of? What are they afraid of? So that when I am crafting stories to connect with them, they see that I understand. I've taken the time to understand them. I appreciate what they want and why that's important to them. And probably most importantly, I can empathize with why they don't currently have it. Therefore, I'm going to show you how I can help you get it. So that really hit me strong. I thought he's not saying anything different than they should be telling us in marketing classes, that you have to understand your prospect and your customer in a godlike way. The stories they are telling themselves, both the pro and con about you and your industry and your offering, and how you can help them. The other thing he said that really stood out, well, there's a number of them, but going back to this limbic system, and he said to that crowd, make no mistake about it. Our conscious mind is simply the PR department for our subconscious mind, where all of our real decisions are being made. So I couldn't think of a more powerful way of talking about sales and marketing and leadership is
Yes.
You have to connect with that subconscious mind in a very authentic way by understanding your prospect and your customer, get them to buy in. And then when they level it up to their PR department, their conscious mind is when you then drop in the logic reason bombs of say, here, let's just justify the purchase you have made in the background.
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point there too, Mark, which is, because we're talking to leaders inside of companies. I ran a high growth construction company. And one of the things that I realized as we continued to scale the business was the potential existed for me to lose empathy for my people. It was easy to sit in my office and direct and speak to our clients and resolve problems. So I put a note in my Outlook at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock to go do a lap around the building, to see the faces of people, to understand what was happening so that I could speak to them very specifically in the process of meeting their needs. Because not only do we have to do that externally for the people who are actually paying our paychecks, but we have to do that internally to create that compelling place where people love to show up, and they get surprised every Friday that they actually get paid to do this type of work because, boy, my boss is really smart and the people that I work with are amazing. And so I think this is applicable to not only external marketing communications, but also, creating change inside the business. You have to know your people as well.
Yeah, take that one step further. Everybody sitting on this call today is what? A Homo sapien. Essentially, we are storytelling monkeys. It's what separates us from all the other beings out there is that we think, act, organize in story. So it's not just external and it's not just internal. If you're having a hard time getting your kids to eat their peas at dinner time, try an ABT on them. If you're having a hard time with your spouse seeing something the way you're seeing, try an ABT on them from their point of view. It's the way that we connect Homo sapiens together because it's the way our brains are wired to make meaning out of the chaos of being human beings. I mean, you're all about chaos, right, Jerry?
That's right. That's right.
You know, a lot of the work too, we're doing this in this day and age for large brands like the Home Depot, Dell, Intel, and so forth. The questions that they come back to me, Walmart Canada really spelled this out for me. They're talking about the ability to have agility in the organization, you know, being an agile organization that comes right out of agile software development. And as we are flattening the hierarchy, the reporting structure, and you probably see this, Jerry, in your coaching all the time, and we have these remote hybrid teams, communication is absolutely critical. So they're asking for agile communications. How can I make my message succinct, clear, and land right the first time? And again, I have not found in my 35 plus years of communication anything more agile than the and, but, therefore. It's simple to understand, harder to do. It takes practice, but when you nail it, you will actually see your audience lean into you. I mean, it's really crazy. That's why with the business of story, I talk about the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling. The applied science is an algorithm like the and, but, therefore, the 5 primal elements of a short story, and right up to the 10 steps of the story cycle system. Those are the proven algorithms that you can use with intention in your communication. And then watch what happens, how it bewitches that Homo sapien storytelling monkey sitting across from you. It will blow your mind.
I love that. I love the mix of the how and the why coming together, the science with the practicality. I want to roll back just 30 seconds. You said using this to get your kids to eat green beans and to get your wife to act, because my wife happens to be on my wife happens to be on the call today, Park. And so
now she knows what you're going to be doing.
I know. So I'm sold out there. But what is an ABT that you have used to get your wife to move and take action?
Oh my God, she's been around me too long and have heard too many of my presentations. So she's all about the and, but, and therefore. But it might be something as simple as, hey, let's go buy a new sofa for the living room when I'm thinking our sofa is just fine as is. And so it may be something of, yes, Michelle, I mean, a new sofa would be beautiful and that leather would be, you know, look really sensational in our living room. But we are trying to save up for that cruise in the south of France in fall of 2013. Therefore, why don't we table that decision for another month and decide if that's really in our best interest? If we need it, then we'll go and do that. So it's a very logical, reasoned approach, but you're setting up with this, you know, statement of agreement. Like, I get it. I'm on your side. We have this shared vision of what we would like. But if we do that, it may get in the way of something else that we've agreed we really want to do. Therefore, maybe we should hold off for a month. There would be an example of it.
I'm glad I got on this call so that couldn't be used on me later for the Italy trip.
It's really powerful stuff.
It is really powerful stuff. I am going to try it later on, though. I'm going to see if I can get her on it, Mark.
I've got really one for you that's a little bit more in the trenches. You know, son, I love you dearly, and I totally get that smoking weed is fun. It's the way people party these days, and it's even legal in a lot of states. But do you ever wonder if it's getting in the way of the goals that you want to achieve? Therefore, you might consider not smoking weed for a week and see how it impacts the direction of your life.
I love that one. think that
we
was
get to
phenomenal.
deal with that every now and again in our lives, whether it's a son, friend, family member, or whomever. But these are things that you want to, it's really important to establish that statement of agreement in your hand. Like, I get it. We're in this together, buddy. You know, we're going to do this stuff. But here's something that seems to be standing in the way of our progress. Therefore, here's a logical way around that. What do you think? But
I love it.
a lot of times in sales and marketing, we're told to lead with a problem. And we have found, and I was coached that a long time ago, but we have found it's not nearly as impactful as when you lead with that shared vision of what success looks like, something aspirational, because people are much more likely to embrace you and listen to you when you say, I get what you want. And I think that's really cool. And then you insert the problem. If you insert the problem at the beginning, you run the risk, and Jerry, maybe you've seen this in your coaching too, of people push back. Maybe it is the real problem and you've identified it, but they go, whoa, 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 Jerry. That's not the way I see it. Now you've got this divisive relationship set up that you have to sort of course correct if you can.
Yep.
But if you start with that positive, here's what a brighter tomorrow looks like together. And you get them nodding, say, yeah, man, that'd be so awesome. But here's the problem why we're having a hard time getting there. Therefore, here's how we can move ahead. It takes chaos, it brings meaning to it, and most importantly, it closes that story loop with an answer of why we should be moving forward in the way you are recommending.
I love this. It's such a simple and effective framework. Is there any place that you've seen it not work, Park?
Well, it doesn't work when you've got more than one narrative. When you first write down your first ABT, which is going to be what we call an informational ABT, which is loaded with too much stuff, probably has 2 or 3, maybe even 4 different narratives going on. And when people try to roll that out, then you lose your audience because it is typically too non-narrative up top. It's too and. You don't have a central singular focus on the problem, and so you lose your audience. When you see them in action out in the wild, you typically see them that they have been so refined that they're very powerful. I was just trying to think of, I can't even recite one that I thought was so clunky that didn't work, other than the work I do with my clients when they come in with one this big and we boil it down to this size. But yeah, it is about, the trick is about finding that singular problem that you're talking about so you can keep the audience focused on one thing. Our brain is not good at all at focusing on 2 things at one time. You know, again, that would not have served us and our ancestors in the savannah to go out. And if it gets bombarded with all this information, it just retreats back to the cave. It is always looking for what is that single threat source. And that's why we want to talk about a single problem that we are solving to at least open up the door to get in. The other thing is kind of an interesting trick. You know, we all suffer from this negativity bias, right? So when we go into prospects and customers and we have something that's really going to help them, they often tell themselves an anti-story. I couldn't possibly do it, Park. Won't work here. I don't have enough time. I don't have the finances. My people will never buy into it. So they've got one negative story after another because that's the way our brain is wired in this survival mode. So let me try something with the group here. Maybe we can get everyone to fire up their cameras real quick, because I would like to see the reaction on their faces if we can.
Ooh, I love it.
So go ahead, if you all would fire up your cameras, and I'm going to bounce this thing off of you. The first question I have, raise your hand. Have any of you heard of Ernest Hemingway's shortest story ever told? Greg, did I see your hand go up? Yeah. Rachel, Sharon, Kurt, I don't know, the rest of you out there. It goes like this: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. 6 words, shortest story ever written by Ernest Hemingway. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Now, my question to you is, why were those baby shoes never worn? Anybody, fire up your microphone and tell me why those baby shoes were never worn.
Gosh, I hate to say it, but I mean, did the baby not make it through birth, and there was a baby shower gift?
The baby died.
Baby outgrew them before he learned to walk.
Maybe outgrew him before he learned to walk. Was that your first answer, or did you first start with the baby died, Bill?
No, I didn't have a baby die.
Okay,
I was gonna
Sorry.
say they never sold.
interesting. They never sold, so they were just trying to get rid of them. Sean, how about you? He's not sure. Mike, what was your conclusion? How did you close that story loop?
Yeah, I thought this kid never wore them.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter, we had shoes that were gifts and they never went on her feet. So just went there.
So what's happening? Try this in your own circles. It's kind of a fun little parlor trick. If you're at a party or whatever, recite that for sale baby shoes never worn and watch the majority of that room. Some people will even gasp. They will automatically go to the baby died. And the reason why we do this is this negativity bias is that is the most finite conclusion that our brain can draw when we leave an open story loop. And that's exactly what Ernest Hemingway did, is he left it open for interpretation for you to determine why those shoes were for sale. Like Craig said, it died or no, it was Bill said you never wore them. Another answer could be the baby was so healthy that it outgrew the shoes before they could put them on their feet. There are all of these extraordinarily positive reasons why the baby didn't wear those shoes, but those are too ambiguous. There are too many of them. Our negative enforced brain is going to go to the most finite conclusion. Think about when you get ghosted, and we all get ghosted with an email or a text. What do you tell yourself? You go to the most finite conclusion. I'll never talk to him again. That person's a jerk. I've totally destroyed the relationship, or whatever it is. And so when we are communicating in leadership and anywhere else, and we don't close that story loop using the and, but, therefore, your audiences are going to close it for you. And chances are it's not the conclusion you had intended unless you intentionally close that story loop. The and, but, therefore is another fabulous tool that makes sure you close that story loop from setup to problem to how you've got a solution for them and what the next steps are.
I think that's such a great one. By the way, I hate to admit this, but I was with Craig Besky. I actually thought the baby must have passed away.
Mm-hmm. Everybody.
And
I mean, that's your first inclination.
yeah, and so I think one of the pieces in that, and it's so good because Timmy Gallagher came and we talked about the mind. I think it was episode maybe 18 or 19. But nature abhors a vacuum, and so when you aren't giving people the story that needs to be told, they're going to make up their own. And so where do I see this happen a lot, Park? With values. So the company will say, oh, the values, they're on the wall. I always advise people, make sure you have the stories that highlight the values of the company. Because the true values of the company are the stories that are told at the lunch table when you're not there. And so you have to get yourself into a place where, these are the company stories. And if you don't, because of the mind's thrive brain, chimp brain, survival mode, if you don't, it's usually the negative stories that come out at the lunch table. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great reminder for everyone about this.
Yeah. Don't tell me what the values are in a plaque. Show them to me in action by how our customers and how our colleagues and how the communities we serve are benefiting from these values or are demonstrating the values in action. True story, well told. That's where the 5 primal elements of a short story come in, but we're focused on the ABT. Today.
We'll have to have you back.
Sure.
To give us those. I didn't know if anyone had given some thought as to what their ABT might be. And so I don't know if I know Craig Besky's in sales. Mike Hines, I know you've been working on your ABT and who you're thinking about. I know Rachel Barnes is in sales. If you have one, you guys can pop on. I would love to take the training wheels off and have a conversation about it.
Absolutely. Let's put one to the task.
As you had mentioned it when he was talking, I started to write something down, but I then realized I'm really missing him talking, and so I'm not going to do this right now. So I got about a quarter to halfway through the thought process and left it.
Well, Craig, if we can, if it's all right with you, Jerry, let's just build
Yeah.
one together here. So you've got a message that you're trying to share with someone. And here's a great way to start your ABT. Let's start first with the but statements. What is the problem in this message that you're thinking about, Craig, that you would be solving for your audience?
Cost savings initiatives.
Cost savings initiatives. Okay, so that's general. So what is
It
the
is,
problem?
yes.
Is they're spending too much money on stuff?
Correct.
What are they spending too much money on? Specifically.
Sure. Specifically, stretch film for packaging.
Stretch film for packaging. Okay. So we're going to say spending too much on stretch film for packaging. Now let's jump up to the statement of agreement. Who's your number one audience? Identify them. Can you specifically say who they are?
Yes, it's the decision maker that we met with.
And what is their role? Are they in shipping, global supply chain?
He is the operations manager.
Okay, so we got an operations manager. And what's important to him relative to this shipping product? What's a brighter future tomorrow look like for him that he's trying to get?
So as we tried to peel that onion on him, really he was just focused and fixated on cost as much as we tried to find other pain points.
Okay. So he is an operations manager, and if he can reduce his costs on shipping materials, then he is going to have a much more successful operation. But
it helps with one of his, yes.
But currently they're spending 20% more for their stretch shipping or whatever you said there,
Right.
than their nearest competitor, which is really, impacting the success of his operation. Therefore, he can reduce his costs immediately by doing what?
Mirroring the right product to his operation.
So by finding the right product to put into his operation. So now all of a sudden that cost thing is kind of a symptom of a bigger problem. And maybe that bigger real problem is he doesn't have enough knowledge to be buying the right product that will ultimately make him more efficient and save him money.
Correct.
So is he coming to you then as his mentor or guide to make sure that he is buying the absolute right product?
Well, I'm now in the position of where your conversation is going, which is getting his audience and getting his attention, right? So I mean that's the advantage of the the ABT statement, right?
Yeah.
So that's where this is. That is exactly why this is hitting that particular instance for me, and has sparked the curiosity. Is trying to get him to open up, and because he's closed-minded to the potential that he's using the wrong product.
Okay. So that would be a great way to come in with that statement of agreement to build that trust initially. Hey, Bob, you're running a tight ship here and you have a lot of choices to use in shipping materials. If you make the right choice, not only are you more efficient, but you're going to save a lot of money in the process. But you've got a number of different options here with this particular stretch packaging thing, and quite obviously are not using the right one. Therefore, bring us in with our expertise, and we're going to make sure that you have the right product in hand, make you more efficient, and save you money in the short term, long term, whatever. I don't know. I'm just spitballing it there, but I'm doing this as an example of we first started with cost savings, which actually is a symptom of a bigger problem. And the real problem, it sounds like you might be solving for him, and that is consultation, making sure he's selecting the absolute right product that is going to make him more efficient and more profitable. Am I close?
Yes. Yes. That's the wheels that are turning at this point for me.
Okay, good. And this is a great exercise for anybody when you are trying to write down and figure out what your core message is. A lot of times you'll go through the gyrations of writing 3 or 4 or 5 different ABTs until you go, aha, that's the real problem we're solving for. Let me now get that dialed in. And it'll blow you away when you then go back in front of that prospect and start that meeting, rolling out that ABT. It gets them on board immediately so they know exactly what you're talking about, what you're selling. And then you could take the rest of the meeting to show how you're going to deliver on those promises.
I love this. So let's break this down, Mark, right? Because I
Okay.
just want to make sure that we leave a good stamp on the episode here. Because what you just did for Craig Beskey was amazing to watch someone like think about these things and who am I serving? What's the problem I'm solving? So you don't just go in a linear fashion, because this is, probably one of the things that when I'm writing these things, I'm not starting with the but. And so I think, that's a great piece of the puzzle that I had not picked up on. So you start with the but, you figure out the problem that you're going to ultimately resolve for them. You move over into who your number one audience is, and you describe them. And then you move into what's important to that person, what's the brighter future, and then how you can go actually solve that for them. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an amazing little roadmap that you've provided. It's so cool, and I think I just have to continue to work on it myself personally.
Well, think of it like a donut. And this is
Okay.
literally a metaphor you just triggered in my brain. I'm going to use it from here on out. You want to start with the hole. That's the but. What's the hole in your prospect's life that they're trying to fill?
Yes.
Then you're going to go to the top of that donut and you're going to say, this is a delicious kind of donut and you love it because of this, but you got a big hole in the middle of it. Therefore, we are going to now sprinkle it with this to get you where you want. So think of it, start with the donut hole and then build your ABT around it.
It's so good. And again, it's funny. It's the shoemaker not wearing shoes, because I talk about this a lot with people that I serve. We have to be clear, 100% clear on who we serve, how we serve them, and the problem that we are solving for them. And it has to be important enough and it has to be painful enough that they'll be continuing to pull their wallet out to pay you. And so I think this is a really good resolution for me.
Good.
So thank you for that. Listen, this has been great. We're running up on an hour, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Park, where can people find you? Where are the best places that if you're looking to get more information, more Park Howell in your life, how do we do it?
Well, come on over to businessofstory.com. I've also got 3 short online classes about the ABT. I just launched one last week called the ABTs of Agile Communications. It's 3 20-minute modules, 20-minute videos by me that you can sit down. And the idea is bring a communications challenge to it and we will work through it. And you can find that at businessofstory.com/ABT. You're also going to find 2 other shorter courses, the ABTs of selling and the ABTs of branding. The ABTs of selling is about 18 minutes long, focused just on the sales process. ABTs of branding is about 24 minutes long, focused just on branding. But this bigger course, this 1-hour course, takes you through all aspects of the ABT in all forms of communication. The singular narrative is put the ABT Agile narrative framework to you in virtually all of your messaging. You are the content expert. This is the form that you want to share your content in. It's something I wished I'd learned in the 3rd grade, but I'm so happy now over the past I'm over a decade of sharing the ABT with the world, and the impact it's had has been amazing. Just blow me away. So like you said, Jerry, you're trying to impact 5 million people in 5 years. I am too. So I'm right alongside of you with that.
Hey, amen. Let's come on along for the mission, Park. This is fantastic. And I can personally vouch for this, right? So I just sent 20 of these books to some leaders that needed to hear it because they're not very good at storytelling. And I can also tell you that I have bought the course. And so I've been through it. Paul has been through it. And so I can recommend it firsthand. It's just so good to sit down and be thoughtful, because a lot of this it doesn't come naturally, but Park just grabs you right by the hand and shows you exactly the way that you need to do this to be more successful.
Well, good.
So-
I'm glad you took the course. And yeah, that book is The Narrative Gym for Business. Co-wrote it with Dr. Randy Olson. It's only 75 pages. It's meant to be a really quick read and a resource for you to have by your side all the time when you're writing. And if you come across a challenge, you can look it up in here and figure out how to overcome it.
Amen. Amen. All right, Park, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for being here. We'll close this out. So next week, I am actually running a strategic plan. So we will not have a show next week. But the week after, so the 15th of September, we're going to have Isaiah McPeak. He is the CEO of Scribe, and he has this framework about communication and asking really deep questions and looking for cues on how to get to the question behind the question to really get the answers that are out there. So I think that'll be a really fun episode. And so again, thank you for coming. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. And as I like to always say about Alex Sanfilippo, because he gave me this one, make sure you give it a 5-star review. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Jerry. Thank you all.